Dear listeners, welcome. Today, we will be talking about unsolved mysteries from the Paleolithic Age. Calm yourself for a while. Close your eyes. Forget about today's tiredness. The messages, the noise, the screens, let all of it fade. Tonight, you woke up 25,000 years ago from today, in the Paleolithic Age, where survival isn't a choice. It's your entire existence. The air is cold, the kind of cold that bites through fur and bone. You shift beneath a heavy animal skin, lying on a bed of woven grass in the shadows of a quiet cave. Around you, the low sounds of sleep, your family, your clan, breathing slowly in the dark. The fire has burned low, just soft embers now, pulsing gently like the last heartbeat of night. You don't know what a mattress is, or a clock, or a city, but you know the wind. You know how to shape stone into a blade. You know what danger smells like. And tonight, as your mind drifts between then and now, we'll walk together through the oldest mysteries your world left behind. Strange things your people carved, buried, built, and never explained. Breathe in, let go, and step with me softly into the deep and distant Paleolithic past. Our first stop lies in the northern hills of Spain, a quiet slope covered with trees and lichen, broken only by the dark mouth of a cave. This is El Castillo, the castle. Though there are no battlements here, no bricks, no fortress walls, just stone and shadow worn by wind and rain. The cave was first explored more than a century ago in 1903, but its real story began long before that, long before the idea of countries, before agriculture, before writing. Somewhere, around 40,000 years ago, a human stepped inside this cave. They carried no flashlight, no camera, no notebook, only fire and pigment. If you follow the passage deep, inside where sunlight has never reached, you'll see them, the hands. More than 100 hand stencils are scattered across the chamber walls. Red hands, ghostly outlines, some crisp, others faded by time. They look simple, even childlike, just open palms sprayed with ochre pigment, creating a silhouette. But they carry a strange kind of weight, a presence. And for scientists and archaeologists, they carry a puzzle. These are not handprints, not pressed into wet clay or paint. They are stencils made by placing the hand against the rock and blowing pigment around it, probably through a hollow bone or directly from the mouth. Each one required effort. Each one was deliberate, and yet we still don't know why. Were they marking territory? Was it part of a ritual, some Paleolithic tradition of passage or belonging? A way to say, I was here without words. One theory suggests they were spiritual, a way to connect with the rock, or the spirits they believed lived beyond it. Another imagines them as a kind of early language, a gesture that transcended speech. Or perhaps they were nothing more than a playful act, like children blowing paint around their fingers. But even the simplest interpretation still leaves questions, because some of the hands are missing fingers, not broken off, not smudged or incomplete, deliberately missing. 2 fingers here, but in many cases, the stencils are too cleanly made, too consistent. Some researchers believe these finger configurations might have been a form of code, an early type of sign language, a way of communicating things we'll never fully grasp. Others propose a more symbolic explanation, that the missing fingers might represent grief, loss, mourning. In some traditional societies today, people remove a finger to mark the death of a loved one. Could it be the same, echoing back tens of thousands of years? The pigment used was red ochre ground mineral mixed with animal fat or water. Red like blood. Red like fire. Red like life itself. The hands stretch across a part of the cave known as the panel of hands. There, they crowd together, overlapping, in places, each one speaking silently across time. And here's the part that quietly shifts the way we see our species. Many of these hand stencils may not have been made by modern humans. El Castillo's oldest pigment markings have been dated to more than 40,800 years ago. But Homo sapiens didn't arrive in northern Spain until just after that time, which means these stencils could have been made by Neanderthals. For decades, Neanderthals were viewed as brutish and unsophisticated. But if they made these delicate, deliberate stencils, then they understood symbolism. They had rituals. They expressed something beyond survival, a connection to place, to meaning, to memory. It changes how we see them and how we see ourselves. The cave is closed to the public now to protect the fragile pigments, but researchers enter with careful steps. Muffled, lights dimmed, each one aware they are walking into an ancient gallery of thoughts. The walls hold more than just hands. They include outlines of bison, dots and discs, and strange abstract shapes. But the hands remain the most haunting, because they look so familiar when you see them. You can almost feel the person behind it, the way they pressed their hand flat against the wall, steadied their breath and exhaled. The pigment would settle around their fingers. Then they'd pull the hand away, leaving behind the ghost of their touch. We don't know their name, or their language, or what they believed. But that outlined the negative image of a human hand still glows red after 40,000 years. A message from someone who lived and breathed, who hunted and gathered, who feared the dark and loved the fire. They reached out and now, across millennia, we reach back, not to solve the mystery, but to remember that even in the earliest ages of the world, someone wanted to leave a trace, not a monument, not a tower, just a hand, a quiet whisper in red. I was here. Now, let us drift even further back in time, to a place where ocean waves still echo against ancient cliffs, a quiet, windswept cave in South Africa looking out over the Indian Ocean. It is called Blombos Cave, and deep inside its chambers, buried beneath layers of sand and stone, lies a mystery that has puzzled archaeologists for decades. This place was once home to people hunter-gatherers who lived here nearly 75,000 years ago. They made tools, cooked food, and lit fires under the low ceilings of the cave, and somewhere in the middle of their simple routines, they did something unusual. Among the shells and animal bones and charcoal, archaeologists found a small, flat object. At first glance, it looked like an ordinary chunk of ochre, a deep red mineral used as pigment. But when they brushed the dust away, they saw it etched into the surface with deliberate marks, a cross-hatch pattern, like a grid drawn by hand, carved with care, not random scratches, not wear from tools, but it designed something purposeful. It was old, very old, older than any known example of writing, older than any alphabet, and yet it looked intentional. This one piece of carved ochre, small enough to fit into a pocket, held within it the quiet suggestion of abstract thought. It seemed to say, someone made this, not for food, not for fire, but for meaning. The pattern was made of intersecting lines, spaced with surprising precision, and that changed everything. Because when people think of the Paleolithic Age, they imagine crude tools and rough survival. But this was not crude. This was deliberate. Some researchers believe it could be a form of symbolic thinking, a visual language, not quite writing, but perhaps a memory, a map, or even art. And that's not the only thing they found in Blombos Cave. Nearby were shell beads, small, delicate, with tiny holes pierced through their centers. Strung together with plant fibers, they may have been worn as necklaces or decorations. That matters, because ornamentation means something deeper. It means these people weren't just trying to survive. They were trying to express, to decorate themselves, to communicate who they were. Some of the shells still carried traces of red ochre. Perhaps they were painted. Perhaps they were symbols of identity or protection or beauty, and deeper still, more ochre was found ground into powder. This was not a wartime accident. It was a regular practice. They were making color, using pigment, marking the world around them. They weren't building cities. They weren't farming the land. Someone crouched in the dim light of a fire, holding a stone in one hand, carving a grid with the other. They weren't building anything practical. They weren't protecting themselves from danger. They were doing something unnecessary, and yet we call it expression, creativity, symbolic behavior. But at the time, it was simply an idea. One person's thought made real with a stone tool on a piece of pigment. And that small act rippled through time. When archaeologists found a carved ochre piece, they didn't just find an artifact. They found a clue, a fragment of human thought frozen in time. The discovery of symbolic behavior in Blombos Cave pushed back the timeline of abstract thinking. Before this, scientists believed such behavior only began around 40,000 years ago. But this artifact proved otherwise. It showed that humans had the capacity for imagination tens of thousands of years. Earlier than expected, even more curious, the cave itself may have been a special place, a kind of early sanctuary, because not everyone in the area lived inside it. Some visited, some returned. It was meaningful, a space chosen, maybe for ritual, for memory, or for something we may never fully understand. And a carved piece of ochre, the one with the grid pattern, was not the only decorated object. Other ochre fragments were found with lines not quite the same, but clearly intentional. It suggests repetition, habit, tradition. These weren't isolated events. They were part of a larger story, a pattern passed through generations. So, we are left with a quiet but powerful question. What were they trying to say? Was it a spiritual language, a memory of the sky, a symbol for rain or fire or family, or something deeply personal? Now lost in the slow erosion of time, we may never know. And perhaps that is the point. Some things are meant to remain as whispers, not to be solved, but to be felt. And so the ochre grid rests in its glass case, in a museum far from the cave where it was found, still etched with, remember this, before there were books or scrolls or alphabets, there were marks on stone, tiny, careful lines carved by firelight, by someone who had nothing but imagination. And that is where the story of human creativity begins, in the red dust of Blombos Cave, under the rock, beside the fire, in silence. Now, let us travel northward, beyond the hills of Spain and the cliffs of Africa. Let us walk through the gentle, forested lands of what is now Germany. There, near the banks of the Rhine River, lies a place called Bonnober Castle. Today, it is an ordinary place, quiet, green, covered in buildings and trees. But beneath the soil, something extraordinary was discovered in the early spring of 1914. Just before the outbreak of the First World War, two workers were digging for stone. They were not scientists. They were not searching for the past. And yet, what they uncovered would become one of the most significant burial discoveries in all of Paleolithic archaeology. What they found were bones, but not just any bones. They had uncovered a double burial to humans buried side by side. And nearby, a third body, not a person, but a dog, yes, a dog. And this quiet, simple burial raised one of the most touching and perplexing questions of early human history. because this may be the oldest known grave containing both humans and a domesticated animal, dated to around 14,000 years ago at the end of the Ice Age. The two humans, a man and a woman, had been buried with care. Their bones were arranged gently, their heads faced the same direction. Grave goods were found, 2 tools, ornaments, things of meaning. But it was the dog that caught everyone's attention. It wasn't just lying nearby, it was placed with intention, as if it belonged there. This was not a wild wolf. This was not food. It was a companion. The dog had been buried alongside the humans, as if it were part of their family. And that changes the way we understand early human life. Because for most of the Paleolithic Age, humans hunted wild animals. They feared predators, they competed with wolves. But here, for the first time, we see evidence of something different. A bond, a relationship, a moment of trust between species. Scientists examined a dog's bones carefully. It was young, just a puppy. And even more curious, it had been sick, suffering from canine distemper, a serious illness, especially in those times. But here's the surprising part. The puppy had survived weeks, maybe even months with the disease. It would have needed care. It would not have been able to hunt or eat on its own. Someone had looked after it. Someone had fed it, kept it warm, stayed beside it in a time when every day meant struggling to survive. Someone chose to care for a sick dog. This small detail, so easy to overlook, tells us something profound. It tells us that early humans were not just practical survivors. They had compassion, they had empathy, they made space in their lives for connection, even across species. And when the puppy died, they buried it, not far away, not forgotten, but with them together. And so we ask, was this the first pet? The first loyal friend? Was this the beginning of the human-dog relationship that would echo through every age that followed? We do not know the names of the people buried there. We do not know the dog's name either, but something in the way they were laid to rest tells a story, a quiet, tender story of warmth and grief and loyalty. Later, when archaeologists examined the burial again, they found something else. Red ochre, sprinkled over the bones. Ochre is often associated with ritual, with ceremony, with meaning, which means this was not just a burial, it was a farewell, a goodbye, a moment of love, frozen in earth, waiting thousands of years to be seen again. The dog was not an object, it was a soul they cared for. And this changes how we understand the past. Because often, when we think of ancient people, we imagine them as distant, as primitive, as cold and brutal. But this small puppy buried with its people whispers something different. It reminds us that humans, even in the Paleolithic world, could form deep emotional bonds, that they could choose kindness even when life was hard, and that love, real love, might be older than we ever imagined. The burial at Bonobo Castle stands as a gentle, silent monument to that bond. Not made of stone, not built by kings, just a resting place for 3 beings who shared something special. One day, they all passed away, and someone, perhaps a surviving friend or family member, chose to place them together. Human and dog, side by side. It's not a mystery that needs solving. It's a mystery that reminds us how deeply human the past truly was. And so, as you listen now, as your body begins to soften into sleep, you can imagine the firelight flickering gently in the distance, a cold evening on the edge of the Ice Age. Someone kneeling in the earth, wrapping a small puppy in fur, whispering a quiet goodbye, and then placing it into the ground, not as an animal, but as family. As we move deeper into the Paleolithic past, we find ourselves surrounded by objects that once held meaning.
Some were tools, some were weapons, others were something entirely different. Across thousands of miles from the icy plains of Siberia to the river valleys of France, tiny carved figures have been found. They are simple, but powerful, and they are unlike anything else from their time. We call them the Venus figurines. No one knows what they were originally called. No one knows if they even had names. But the name Venus was given by modern archaeologists after the Roman goddess of beauty and love. Though the figures are far older than Rome, far older than cities, older even than writing itself. These small carvings date back between 25,000 and 30,000 years, and they all share something in common. Each one is a representation of a woman, not just a rough outline, but a deliberate focus on the female form. They were carved from stone, from ivory, even from clay. They fit in the palm of your hand, and each one was shaped with care, with attention and intention. Their features are exaggerated: large breasts, white hips, full stomachs, sometimes a clearly pregnant belly. Some are faceless. Some have tiny heads, barely shaped at all. Others show arms folded over chests or legs drawn close together. They are not erotic. They are not decorative. They are symbolic. But what do they symbolize? That is the mystery. Some archaeologists believe they were fertility icons. Perhaps they were meant to ensure safe births, or to bring health to pregnant women. Or maybe they were connected to the cycles of life and death. Others think they were religious representations of an earth goddess or mother figure. Long before such ideas were written down, perhaps they were held during rituals, used in ceremonies, carried by travelers, or buried with the dead. But then, there is another theory, a quieter one, more personal. What if they were made by women themselves? Not as religious objects, not as symbols of fertility, but simply as reflections of themselves. Some researchers noticed that the way the body is shaped rounded, curved, viewed from above matches how a woman might see herself looking down. Could these be the first self-portraits in history? Carved not for others, but for the self. It's a haunting thought, because the figures do not follow a single pattern. They vary. Some are plump, others slim, some are smooth, while others are rough and textured. Some show careful detail, others are abstract, yet the idea remains consistent. The female form, carved again and again across thousands of years, across vast landscapes, from Western Europe to Central Russia. How did the same image appear in so many places? There were no empires, no roads, no shared language, and yet the Venus figures appear over and over again like echoes of a common dream. They have been found in caves, in campsites, in riverbanks and burial grounds. One of the most famous is the Venus of Willendorf, discovered in Austria in 1908. She is just over 4 inches tall, made of limestone. Her head is covered with rows of braids or perhaps a woven cap. Her arms rest on her chest. Her form is full, rounded, complete. She is not a goddess in the way we might imagine. She is something older, something more primal. Another figure, the Venus of Hohenfels, was found in a cave in Germany, carved from mammoth ivory. It may be the oldest known sculpture of a human being, around 40,000 years old. She has no face, only a body, a symbol of life, of survival, of continuity. And yet, not a single written word was left to explain them, no carvings beside them, no stories passed down. Only the figures themselves remain, silent, mysterious, enduring. Some were buried, some were broken, perhaps intentionally, perhaps as part of a ritual, lost to time. Others were left behind in caves, nestled into crevices, in the walls. Maybe they were placed there with reverence, maybe with fear, maybe with hope. And so we are left with questions. Were they protectors, gifts to the spirit world, representations of love, of motherhood, of strength, or were they simply expressions, an artist's quiet way of saying, this is what I see? There is beauty in not knowing, in the silence of stone, in the way a simple object can survive 30,000 years without losing its mystery. The Venus figurines are not grand monuments. They are not towering temples. They are small, personal, intimate. And maybe that is why they still speak to us. Because in a world filled with danger, where food was scarce and life was fragile, someone took the time to shape a figure, not to survive, but to mean something, and that meaning still lingers in museums, in caves, in the dust of ancient earth. So, as you rest now, and the world around you softens into darkness, picture a woman in a firelit cave. She holds a piece of ivory in one hand, a sharp stone in the other, and slowly, over many hours, she carves the curves of a body, not for fame, not for trade, but because it mattered to her. That quiet act of creation, forgotten by history, but never erased, still echoes through time. And it waits for you, right here, as you drift further into sleep.
Now, let us walk into darkness, a different kind of darkness, not the kind you feel at night, beneath stars or in shadowed forests, but a deeper kind, a darkness that was untouched by sunlight for over 30,000 years. Our journey brings us now to the south of France, to a quiet limestone cliff that hides a secret behind its stony face. This place is called Chauvet Cave. It was sealed long ago, not by human hands, but by nature. A rockfall, thousands of years ago, closed its entrance completely, and for all those centuries that followed, the cave remained hidden, undisturbed, unseen, until 1994. That year, 3 cave explorers, Jean-Marie Chauvet and his companions, stumbled upon a narrow crack in the stone. They followed it, crawling, climbing, feeling their way through the cold tunnel, and then they emerged into a vast, silent chamber. Their lights flickered against the walls, and what they saw took their breath away. All around them, stretching for meters in every direction, were paintings, perfectly preserved, silent, majestic. There were lions, not lying down but running, chasing, rhinoceroses painted in groups, woolly mammoths, horses with wide, flowing manes, bears, bison, reindeer. Some of the animals overlapped. Some showed movement, legs drawn in different positions as if frozen mid-run. And all of it was old, very old. Some paintings were later dated to over 36,000 years ago, long before writing, long before agriculture, even before most of the known cave art of Europe thought that this cave was not primitive. The drawings were skillful, confident, graceful. Shading had been used to show depth, lines curved naturally. Some animals had been scraped into the stone before being painted. Others were outlined in charcoal, their forms glowing gently in the torchlight. Who created them, and why? We may never know their names, but we know they entered this cave with purpose. They brought torches made of pine. They left marks from their fingers smeared along the walls. They even left footprints preserved in the soft clay of the floor. One footprint belonged to a child. Beside it, the paw prints of a wolf. Were they walking together? Did the animal follow the child? Or were they there at different times? No one can say for sure. In the depths of the cave, scientists also found a bear skull, placed carefully on a flat rock facing the entrance of the chamber. It wasn't a natural position. Someone put it there, perhaps in reverence, perhaps as a warning, perhaps as part of a forgotten ritual. And all around on the cave walls, the paintings continued. Over 400 animals, drawn with charcoal and pigment, brought to life in a space of complete darkness. These artists worked by firelight. Their torches must have flickered. Their shadows must have danced beside them, and yet they painted with precision, with grace, with memory. They did not draw the world outside their door. They painted what they felt, what they imagined, what they revered. Some say the cave was a sanctuary, a sacred place. Others believe it was used for storytelling, or for initiation rites, or even as a kind of theater where shadows danced across the walls and stories came to life. But then something happened. A rock slide blocked the entrance, sealing the cave completely. And for more than 30 millennia, everything inside remained frozen in silence. The paintings were untouched by wind, untouched by rain. No humans returned. No animals entered. The torches burned out. The echoes faded. And the cave slept. Until it was found again. And now, when we peer inside, when we see the lines drawn so long ago, we feel something strange. A kind of connection, a sense that these people, these ancient hands, were not so different from us. They too loved beauty. They too felt wonder. They too longed to make meaning in a world that often felt wild and unknowable. They couldn't leave books or cities or monuments, but they left images. And those images still live, still breathe. We often think of the Paleolithic world as dark, brutal, simple. But Chauvet Cave tells a different story. It tells us that even in the very beginning, humans looked not only at the world but into it, and tried to make sense of what they saw. Through charcoal, through fire, through animals drawn in silence, and even though the cave was sealed for thousands of years, its walls still whisper. They whisper of a time before time, of people who walked into the earth to leave behind a dream, a vision, a story we are still trying to understand. So now, as you let your breath slow, as your thoughts drift gently like smoke from a torch, imagine standing in that chamber, the walls glowing with lions, the ground cool beneath your feet, a soft flicker of fire dancing across stone, and the stillness of 36,000 years pressing in around you. You are not afraid. You are not lost. You are simply there, with them. And in that moment, the past is not a mystery. It is a memory, a whisper in the cave. The disappearance of the Neanderthals for over 300,000 years. Neanderthals thrived across Europe and Western Asia, but around 40,000 years ago they vanished. Was it climate change, disease, competition with Homo sapiens, or did they slowly blend into us? No one truly knows. The meaning of the dots and geometric symbols in caves, many Paleolithic caves, show not just animals, but repeated dots, zigzags, spirals, and ladder-like shapes. Some scientists believe they were early systems of recording time or seasons. Others say they were rituals or codes or even music, but their meaning has faded into silence. The purpose of bone flutes and music in caves like Hohlfells and Nisterites. Archaeologists found ancient flutes made from bird bones and mammoth tusks. They produce music, real notes. Who played them? Why? Was it for dancing, for calling others, for calming spirits? The music has stopped, but the questions still linger. Cave bear worship and animal altars in certain caves. The skulls of bears were placed deliberately, sometimes upright, sometimes arranged in circles, with the people worshipping the bear, honoring it as a guardian, or fearing it as a rival. The answer is locked in stone. The first tattoos and body paint traces of pigment and sharpened tools suggest early humans may have decorated their skin, but without preserved bodies, we can only wonder, were tattoos marks of identity, beauty, magic? The ink has long since faded. And now, dear listener, as your eyes grow heavier and your breath softens, let the shadows of the Paleolithic Age settle quietly around you. You have wandered through caves and torchlight, past carved figurines and stenciled hands. You have stood beside ancient fires, watched wolves become dogs, and listened to flutes that once echoed through stone. The world back then was slow and dark and vast, and yet it was filled with wonder, with art, with mystery, and with people who thought and felt and dreamed just as you do. So rest now. Drift gently. Let your thoughts fade into the stillness of the oldest night. And know that somewhere, far beneath the earth, a handprint still waits in the red glow of ochre, quietly whispering, "I was here. Good night."